Back the summit, what to expect and what exactly is going on. A very good evening to you, Ndapo, and thank you very much for joining us on Business Today.
Good evening, Morris.
Now, we understand that Namibia is hosting the African PPP Summit, which is the Public-Private Partnership Summit, the 15th one actually, for the first time. Now, let's start our discussion by unpacking really why infrastructure is critical in growing Namibia's economy, because infrastructure investment and just in general is a key theme in this year's summit.
Okay, thank you for that question. Really, if you look at developing economies or developed economies, they developed in the back of infrastructure. So it is very critical and important for Namibia as a country, and of course Africa as a continent, to have forums and dialogues around infrastructure development. Now, this particular summit is focused on infrastructure, on public-private partnerships, investments around that, and of course financing and dialogues in terms of government to private sector conversations related to public-private partnership projects. Now, for Namibia particularly, we have heard from Her Excellency when she launched the NDP 6, the focus on economic development. That will, of course, happen on the back of infrastructure development. And we have also seen that in her manifesto to the Namibian population, there was a focus on infrastructure being an enabler of economic development. So we cannot move away from infrastructure development, and that is why, for us as NIPDB, it was a natural decision to co-host such an event that is so critical and timely for a country such as ours.
All right. How does the African PPP Summit platform enhance regional connectivity? Very important component there, and as well as a catalyst or catalyzes the goal rather of boosting intra-Africa trade. I do know that there's a big push for the AFCFTA, but how do all of these dots connect, Ndapo?
Yes. So mentioning the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, we trade on infrastructure. So when we trade commodities or whatever it is that we are exchanging, we need infrastructure, whether it's rail, road, air, or sea. So for us to be able to sell, like what we have seen, I think 2 months ago, where we have shipped our first container to Nigeria, that happened at the port. That is infrastructure. And we cannot move away from the linkages to the African continent. So Namibia is strategically positioned because we are access and entry point to the landlocked neighbors, such as Zambia, with whom we've been doing trade in quite a long time. We've been importing and they've been exporting their copper through Namibia. We have done trade with Botswana, or we have been carrying Botswana's commodities through our port, and of course we are having our corridors which touches and links us to our neighbors. Right. We have the corridor that is touching on Angola, we have the corridor that is touching on Zambia, and of course through up to DRC, we have the corridors that are touching on Botswana and South Africa. So regional connectivity is very important for the development of the region, as the Southern African development community, but also for Africa at large. Because if we are going to do trade within Africa, we need to start with linking our infrastructure so that it enables cross-border transportations or cross-border trading, and make it easier so that countries such as Namibia, who have access to the world through the ports, can then enable trade from other countries, like we've been doing with Zambia and Botswana.
Excuse me. As a global citizen, Namibia is finding herself in a very interesting position, and by that I mean we are directly as well as indirectly competing with over 200 other countries for the attention of investors. Yeah.
Yes.
So how does and how will the NIPDB leverage the African PPP summit platform to showcase Namibia's investment potential to international investors?
Yes. Yes, you are very right that Namibia is competing with the world in terms of investments. But fortunately, I think last year's statistics shows that Namibia is one of the fastest growing attractions of FDI
Right.
on the African continent. I think we are within the top 5 of FDI destinations. And this is really to support government with development plans, because we have limitations in terms of financing or investing into the development that we want to see in the country. So we welcome and invite investors to come and set up their projects in Namibia. Of course, not only for development, but also to support with job creations, with skills development, and of course, infrastructure comes with that. So NIPDB itself as an institution has the mandate to promote Namibia as an investment destination. And it's not only to bring investments into the country,
Right.
but also to retain them here. And how do you do that? It is to create platforms where we introduce Namibia to the world, and such a platform is one of those where we bring in our fellow Africans into Namibia for them to see what the country is about, what investment opportunities we have available. And what we have done as co-hosts of this event is that, of course, the focus is on infrastructure, but we have a pitching session that is going to highlight investment opportunities within the PPP space of Namibian projects, and we are going to then, or the project owners are going to pitch this to the audience and to the investors that have, of course, come to be part of this event.
What are some of the expected outcomes from the summit, both in the short term and long term?
When you invite people into your country, you don't want them to just come and see the country. I mean, it's beautiful and all
Right.
that, and we have opportunities, but we want those opportunities to turn into actual projects, and projects to turn into actual jobs, and see those tangible results. So from this forum, or from this summit, we really want to see conversations that lead to formal collaborations. We want to see an impact on FDI inflow into the country. And we also want to see people coming back to Namibia as
Yes.
tourists, because now they are business tourists, but we want them to come back as either investors or as visitors, because we also want them to explore the rest of Namibia and to visit tourism establishment, because that also feeds into other sectors such as hospitality and tourism, and just to showcase our beautiful country to the outside world. What we also want to see is more of these events, because we are supporting the Ministry of Environment and Tourism with the drive of having Namibia, or positioning Namibia as a business events destination. So there's a concept called MICE, which stands for Meetings, Incentives, Conferences, and Exhibitions. And we want to have and see to host more of those forums in Namibia, because that is part of the inflow of tourists and, of course, investors into the country.
I mean, you did touch a bit on my next question, which is the NIPD has established itself as an organization that does host large-scale international conferences. I mean, last week there was another similar summit that spoke to the public-private forum, and of course other summits and conferences. Now, what is the strategy behind this, really, Ndapewa? And how does the country benefit from this moving forward? I mean, you did highlight the MICE component, but also the Ministry of Environment. You know, what is the idea behind this?
Part of attracting investments into the country, you have to understand what are the priorities of the country. We have priority sectors that are well established, like tourism, but that particular sector was affected by COVID-19 pandemic. So we have seen an increase in tourists coming into the country, and fortunately, it's happening quite fast, and we are very happy to see that. So we are supporting, as I've mentioned before, the Ministry of Environment and Tourism, not only with positioning Namibia as a destination for such events, but we are also supporting an initiative called Brand Namibia. Brand Namibia is really to highlight the country and what it offers. And we are supporting and working with stakeholders in the country from various sectors who are having interactions with the outside world, but really just to highlight and promote Namibia as a destination of business, of choice for business, as a destination of choice for tourism and other aspects of the country. So this is why we support government with such initiatives to make sure that when we are at platforms, international platforms promoting Namibia, we are not only promoting it as an investment destination, for example, in the energy sector or in the infrastructure sector, but we promote the whole country and what it has to offer.
A well-rounded approach to the NIPD mandate, as it were.
Correct.
Before I let you go, the summit, it's here for a couple of days. What are expectations that you'd like to see from the summit from an NIPDB perspective?
From an NIPDB perspective, we want to see what we call the project inquiries, and that's really interest expressed from potential investors.
Right.
We want to see them, of course, flowing through our offices, but we also want to see, because this is not only focused on the outside world. We are co-hosting this event with the Ministry of Works and Transport, who have capital projects that government want to deploy, but there are challenges with deploying them, whether it's technical expertise, whether it's the funding for those projects. So we want to at least bring our dreams closer to realization through such platforms, and that is why we're highlighting Namibia as an investment destination. The other thing that we really are hoping to see is that when we host these events, it's not dialogue only. We want to see practical and tangible results flowing out of these. And as we participate at such platforms, we are also hoping to support a sector such as hospitality,
right.
Such as hospitality is tied to tourism, but we also want to understand and learn from the delegates who are attending the summit. What are the best practices from their country in terms of PPP, in their, whether it's a legal framework or whether it's projects that they've deployed in their countries, what has worked and what has not worked, and the learnings from that.
Ndapewa, thank you very much. That's all the time that we have for you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, welcome back. Now we are joined in a studio by Ms. Nangula Wanja, the Chief Executive Officer of the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board, that is the NIPDB. Now we are currently finding ourselves at the 15th Africa Public-Private Partnership Summit, currently underway in Windhoek, and to just get a sense of the summit from her perspective, as well as her perspective as the CEO of the NIPDB. She is joining us in studio. Very good evening to you, ma'am, and thank you very much for joining us on Business Today.
Good evening. It's great to be here.
Now, ma'am, how does the summit this year, now that is the Africa Public-Private Partnership Summit, promote and accelerate sustainable and viable PPP across Africa?
No, thank you very much. Really, the PPP is definitely about how do we bring the public and the private sector together to make sure that we deliver. There's a statement that I heard somebody say, and he says that from a public sector point of view, public sector uses money to deliver service, while the private sector delivers services to make money. So both of them are involved in the service business. Both of them are involved in the money transaction business, but the way of the direction of flow is different. Now, if public sector uses money to deliver service and the private sector delivers service to make money, then we know that in order to invest, public sector needs the private sector. And you cannot have that relationship without a dialogue. So having a conference such as this one is a conference that promotes dialogue, is a conference that builds trust, because for that funds to flow and for the relationship to grow, you need to build trust. And for trust to be there, you need a dialogue. And a conference like this one is really about a dialogue. It's about getting to know each other. It's about understanding where each other's needs are. It's understanding where each other's strengths are and seeing how do we marry that needs and strength that cash that is needed and the one that is available to make sure that we both achieve what we need to have. And that's why it's important to have conferences such as this one.
Mr. Wanja, Namibia is finding herself in a very interesting place and time and space, as it were. And how timely is a summit like this to Namibia? Of course, looking at our agenda as a nation, how we want to move forward, how we want to position ourselves in the continent and the region, essentially.
Very timely. It is interesting, and just a coincidence. Last week, Thursday and Friday, we had a conversation between the president and her team of public sector leaders and the private sector leaders in Namibia. And that conference, what we call NAMPPF, the Namibia Public-Private Forum. And it's really about how do we, as public sector leaders and the private sector leaders, how do we come together to build this nation? Our president has set a very, very ambitious target of 500,000 jobs. Those 500,000 jobs have to happen across sectors. Now, we know while government is as enabler of jobs, they are not the creator of jobs. Jobs are created by the private sector. And of course, infrastructure is an enabler.
Right.
There is no way that we will be able to do what we need to do without energy, and energy is infrastructure. Without water, and it's infrastructure. Without housing and shelter, which is infrastructure. Without connectivity in terms of digital connectivity and so on. So infrastructure is one of the cross-cutting measures that we need to enable. So, and it's therefore one of the committees or the working group that we had last week was on that one. So it is timely because we were then talking last week about how do we collaborate to help the president to achieve 500,000 jobs between the public and the private sector. And now, we are, again, I'm saying, Namibia's success depends on Africa's success. Today we are having a dialogue on public-private partnership across Africa. I think it is very timely. And
yes.
Like I said, it's probably a coincidence to us.
Yes.
But sometimes divine arrangements know exactly what is happening and why.
No, that is right. Now, you preempted me a bit there because I really wanted to get a sense also from a continental perspective. How is the summit, in your view, facilitating and enabling the mobilization of domestic as well as international capital for infrastructure developmental projects in sub-Saharan Africa?
Yes. So when we look at Africa, start Africa level. So Africa has got the Agenda 2063, and that agenda is clear. Movement of goods and services across the African continent, and then of course moving on onto the movement of people. Now, while the movement of people is a little bit lagging behind, Africa has set clear targets on movement of goods and services, and they've put together an Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. We need to make sure that goods are moving. That came into effect 1 January 2021. Namibia started trading on the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement on the 30th of June this year. Again, you cannot move goods without infrastructure. And therefore, we now need to say, Africa is not about Namibia planning, Angola planning, Zambia planning, Botswana, and everybody planning there. If we plan in isolation, we are not going to move the needle. If we need to move the needle, we need to plan together. Now, our public sector leaders, they have to come together. They are meeting annually. Now, of course, the business community needs to do the same. But we cannot have business planning there, public sector planning there. We need to plan together. And I think this is part of the planning together. And therefore, what comes here is about how do we then showcase available projects. So number one, government will say, here are the needs. If there are specific projects, whether they are driven by the government, whether they're driven by the private sector, they are showcased here. People that have got capital to invest are available here. So we are not only having conversation, we are matching investors that have got money with project promoters. And for example, on Friday morning, we have got a breakfast where we are showcasing Namibian projects to investors who are attending this session. Now, instead of the NIPDB traveling around the world and meeting people from country to country and spending a lot of money and so forth, they are all here.
Right.
And now we can bring our own people, not for us to speak to them, but for them to go and pitch their project to the investors. And of course, if other African project promoters are here, they will have the same opportunity.
Mr. Wanja, from your perspective, how is the NIPDB's mandate, or how does the NIPDB's mandate support the objectives of the summit in fostering infrastructure development and private sector engagement in Namibia?
Yeah. So, a mandate like the NIPDB is an interesting mandate, and
Indeed.
sometimes it can be misunderstood, or so, because it's like, what do you do exactly? You seem to be touching everybody, right, but what is your own function? And that's the point. Our own function is to touch everybody. Because our own function, we say that at NIPDB, we really exist to promote inclusive, or rather investment for inclusive growth.
Right.
And investment, how do we do that? We do that by building trust relationship. Because investment means you have got funding, you are an investor, you've got funding. He's got a project and an idea that he needs to implement, he doesn't need money. Now, the two of you don't know each other. I need to understand who has the money, I need to understand who wants to develop, and maybe even now we have got somebody there who's got a country that needs to be developed. She's got a country that needs to be developed. She's not a private sector person, she doesn't come up with idea. He comes up with idea, he doesn't have money. You've got money, you don't know where it is, and that is why we come in. We come in and find out who has got the money in the ecosystem, who has got the project in the ecosystem, where are the needs of Namibia, how do we bring those parties together, how do we build the trust so that we are the one that they say, okay, I can speak to you, you speak to everybody else in the ecosystem. Because, for example, you are saying, if I come and invest in Namibia with my money, I cannot run from one person to another. I need one person that I can come to, and they connect me to the ecosystem.
Right.
And that is our work. So our work is to understand the Namibian ecosystem, it's to document the Namibian ecosystem, and it's then to understand what is missing in the Namibian ecosystem, what is present in the Namibian ecosystem, and how do we connect various players in the ecosystem so that we can enjoy the benefits of the synergies of that economy, or of that ecosystem. And therefore, then, for example, in here, we are doing these conferences for various reasons. Number one, it's a way of branding Namibia.
Indeed.
You have seen how many people have come here. So now they know about Namibia. And you are here, of course, as a local media, but there are other medias. So many people are promoting Namibia. We are supposed to promote Namibia as a preferred investment destination. This is a platform where we promote Namibia without us traveling. That is number one. Number two, this is a business. An event is a business. How many Namibians are employed here who are freelancing? It's a business opportunity. Number three is increasing tourism. So because the people that are here, they will add a day or two for tourism. And then, of course, those are just the three objectives that are spillover from the real matter, which is promoting investment.
One last question before I let you go to the business of the NIPDB and going to promote and facilitate certain things within the particular summit. What are your expectations from the Africa PPP 2025 summit currently underway?
Of course, the first expectation is just so that we will know each other better, understand each other better, improve our trust, and therefore have open lines of dialogue. The second one is to understand who is in the ecosystem, not only in Namibia, but in Africa. So here there is many people that are here. And now, for example, as NIPDB, we know who are the people that are investing in infrastructure in Africa and globally, and we'll be able to reach out to them. The other outcome is, do we have Namibian projects that might just find one of their investors there? Maybe it is one, maybe it is two. And then, of course, beyond that, if we can find some project that will cut across Africa, so I think those are some of my objectives and expectations, and I'm positive that we'll be able to achieve, because there is very excellent representation from many, many countries at this conference.
Mr. Wanja, thank you very much for joining us on Business Today, and your insights are very, very, very insightful. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for hosting us this evening.
That was Ms. Nangula Owanja, the CEO of the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board, talking to us about the 15th Africa Public-Private Partnership currently underway in Windhoek. Business Today, we'll be back in a moment. Now, as promised earlier on, we are having in studio the CEO of AME Trade, that is Mahad Ahmed. He's going to be talking to us about the 15th Public-Private Partnership Summit currently on the way in Windhoek. A very good evening to you, Ahmed, and thank you very much. Mahad, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Very nice to meet you and to be here with you in this beautiful city and the land of the brave of Namibia.
Welcome.
I'm very delighted to be here. Thank you.
Mahad, so the 15th, this is the 15th Africa PPP Summit, which is themed around promoting and enabling environment to accelerate sustainable and viable PPPs.
Yes.
Now, how does this particular purpose align with not only Namibia's development agenda, but also looking at what the region in Africa's current infrastructure development priorities and policies are?
Right, it's a very good question, and thank you for that. I think it's a common knowledge that a lot of the national governments across Africa, be it here, be it elsewhere, there is a limitation on what the national government can afford for infrastructure projects. So this is nothing new. What we are trying to do is just really advocate for the private sector to come and play a significant role. And the question around what are the regulatory framework to make sure the private sector actually brings value for money, because what you don't want to do is give important infrastructure projects to private sector companies that perhaps are not giving value for money and might not be affordable for the citizens. So the whole conversation is around how the private sector, how can we accelerate the private sector participation in those infrastructure projects, which we know is very evident that there is a gap. So that's really the sort of the essence, the key goal of the conference is to advocate and to encourage private sector to come and see what other opportunities are, and to also press the public sector governments to come up with projects and to make sure that the regulations are ready and fit for purpose.
Now, Mahad, I've had the pleasure of attending the summit, and I've seen a lot of dignitaries from across the region. I need to ask, why Namibia specifically? Why was this a location or destination that was chosen for the summit?
I think for several reasons. I think the conference rotates around the conference. Around the continent. So last year we were in Morocco. There was a delegation from Namibia that came to Morocco, and there was a conversation around what is happening in Namibia. I've never been, and some of the audience at that conference last year in Morocco never been to Namibia. So the conversation was, what's happening in Namibia? Yes, we heard that things are moving, there's a lot of reforms, and the colleagues that came to Morocco were able to articulate a message and a story that there is a vision to really drive and to reform the infrastructure investments and encourage us to come and see. So then I took the chance and came to do a site visit, and looked around, and it was really, really amazing to see what's happening here. So that's how we started, and this is where we are today.
I hope you stay here long enough so we can also show you around if you haven't visited other areas. Focusing a bit still on Namibia, how do you see this particular summit now, that is the Africa PPP Summit, helping Namibia leverage its strategic position as a regional logistic hub to attract more investment in energy, transport, as well as water infrastructure as part of the key themes for the summit?
I think, first of all, the people who are coming, so there is regional and there's international. Obviously, they are divided into different sectors: energy, transport, water and sanitation, as you said. So I think the important thing is that the stakeholders from Namibia to also engage with those people who are here. Nobody will take a flight from, I don't know, UK or Japan or even Kenya or Nigeria, in their business capacity. They want to know what is happening. They want to engage with potential partners. So I think our role is to facilitate that, to make sure that the right people are in the room, and then, of course, assist the colleagues from the Namibian side in terms of the follow-ups, what happens next. But there are a lot of conversations going on. I'm not obviously privy to specific projects, but I do know that there will be a number of meetings throughout the event.
Mahad, I just want to get an understanding from a high-level perspective. We do understand that the continent does face substantial infrastructure investment gaps, estimated at over about $100 billion US dollars annually. What role can Africa's domestic institutional capital, such as pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and the likes, play in bridging the gap through public-private partnerships?
I think there is that gap, and I think it was referenced also earlier in some of the proceedings that there is not a shortage of capital.
Right.
The capital is fragmented.
Right.
And the question now is how can we make sure that this capital is used for efforts that are transformative, that actually bring value and make an impact. So I think there is an alignment, there is awakening, there's a lot of young leaders in all of these institutions today, and there is innovative ways that people are looking at in making sure the capital that is here is actually allocated in the country and also in the region. Namibia's number one export is actually capital.
Right.
So how do we work together to make sure that this capital is allocated to not just the country, but also the region as a whole?
Mahad, also as a CEO of AME Trade, what would you say are the strategic partnerships or collaborations you are aiming to develop during the summit that can help advance infrastructure delivery, not only in Namibia, but of course regionally?
Sure. So I think for us it's very important that the key people or the key officers or the technocrats responsible for implementing PP projects actually have the right capacity.
Right.
They actually are up to date with what are the toolkits that their counterparts in other countries are using. So we need to try and bridge that knowledge gap. So that's why we delivered the masterclass on capacity, the project preparation. I think for us, what we want to do is there has to be a continuation of these kind of meetings that are targeted to the right people, right audience. You've seen throughout the last few days, there's a lot of local businesses that are involved in implementing this event. These are all SMEs.
Right.
They have employees. They are owned by young graduates, Namibian graduates. So what we need to do as a company, for us, our goal is to make sure that there is enough of these activities so that the city is busy and there's business tourism out of these conversations.
Right.
Yeah.
You did preempt my next question there, but I also just want for you to elaborate a bit further. Looking at external stakeholders or stakeholders in general, government, private sector, international stakeholders, do you consider these essential to the success of Triple P infrastructure initiatives that will be discussed within this particular summit? And how is AME Trading looking to further engage with them?
I think the engagement of those stakeholders that you mentioned, which are essentially the national governments, the utilities, the municipalities, at subnational, and the local communities, it's very important that they are involved in these projects, that they have the buy-in, and they are also consulted with throughout the process of any PPP project. I think one of the challenges in the case of Namibia is that, and if I can maybe cite this, that you have an act that has been operational for 8 years, but there hasn't been enough projects because the line ministries or other stakeholders are able to use the single sourcing or direct procurement. Maybe perhaps there isn't enough emphasis or understanding on. It's a very complex innovation way to do the project financing PPPs. So we need to try and capacitate and build that capacity, not just within the Ministry of Finance, but also across the board. Right. So these stakeholders play a critical part for any PP projects, not just here, but across the region. Right.
Finally, before I let you go, from your perspective, Mahad, what legacy should the 15th Africa Public-Private Partnership Summit leave for Namibia and, of course, the wider African continent in terms of infrastructure development and also looking at partnerships and the growth thereof?
Sure. I think for me, the most important thing is to have the asset allocators. In the case of Namibia, you have the pension fund here today, you have DFIs from Germany, from France, to have bankable and projects put in front of them.
Right.
And I think that conversation is happening as we speak.
Right.
In our own little limited way, our own legacy is to make sure that there is a continuity of business for us and for the Namibian colleagues that we're working with. That we are not just coming for this event and then all going back home. No, we need to see more targeted interventions, events that are designed to make an impact on the ground. And for that, of course, we are working with colleagues here on the ground. We have a colleague from Namibia who's been helping us for the last few months. And we want to make sure that there's a lot of talent here. So we just want to make sure that that we capitalize on Namibia's position as a good destination to hold these high-level events.
Right. Mahad, that's all the time I have for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Enjoy your stay in Namibia.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that was Mahad Ahmed, the CEO of AME Trading, talking to us about the 15th Africa Public-Private Partnership currently underway in Windhoek. Business Today, we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. Now, as I promised earlier, we are sitting down, or rather we are still at the 15th Africa PPP Summit here in the capital. I am joined by Panashe Doringo, who is the Director of Monjila Project Advisory and Management. Now, they are an interesting participant here at the summit. They have a lot of insights, they have a lot of information, and we managed to grab Panashe to just get and to pick his brain a bit, to see where his head is at and his sentiment and his feelings, and also really his thoughts regarding the effectiveness of the summit, but most importantly, where Namibia is in relation to the summit and the way forward. Panashe, thank you very much for joining us on Business Today.
Thank you for having me, Maurice.
Now, there's so many things that we're going to have to cover, and we have such a little time. But I really want to get on. I understand that there was a masterclass that started yesterday, and it was a comprehensive training workshop for some of the participants and the stakeholders at the summit. Now, reflecting on the masterclass specifically, how did the discussions, from your perspective, help government representatives understand the critical steps in preparing and finalizing procurement? Because I do understand that some of the work that you do at Monjila is very commercial. You are a commercial entity, but of course, you have a lot of insights in terms of procurement and as well as the PPP and how all of that works.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Maurice. Thanks for having me, NBC, as well. I think one of the big takeouts that came out of the session was that the understanding around public-private partnerships is quite limited in this country. We're seeing that a lot of public entities have an idea of what PPPs are, but the actual legal frameworks about how do you take a project idea and how do you take it through the development process all the way until you actually have an investor, a private sector who comes in, and the modalities that exist between the different stakeholders, that understanding when it's aligned to the actual requirements of the Act and the legal frameworks, it's not as sound as it should be. And I think there's a room to strengthen the understanding, not just with public entities, but also with the public itself as well.
Right, and I think from our perspective as Business Today and NBC, I mean, in the program we've had a lot of representatives from government, public sector representatives, and they have given their insights. And what we're trying to do is really paint the full picture of what is going on in the country and what is going on in terms of the PPP perspective. Now, in what ways did the sessions, specifically on due diligence, deepen the participants' appreciation for financial, legal, which you touched a bit on, technical assessments needed to ensure projects are fully investment ready?
Yeah, I think that's the elephant in the room, to be honest. I mean, the real challenge lies in how do you take the idea and how do you build it to a stage where it's actually bankable. So how do you have a bankable feasibility? And what we're seeing is that a big part of that aspect actually requires amount of time given to building up a technical feasibility. So essentially understanding what are the drivers of that particular project, what technically makes it happen. And with a lot of these projects, there's an investor somewhere. It's probably someone from Turkey, someone from Denmark. They don't know where Okahawa is, and you're trying to sell them an idea of building this project in this town in the middle of nowhere. So they don't understand the technical requirements that are sitting there. They don't understand the legal aspects. Who owns the title deed? What are the legal requirements around managing a green scheme in the middle of nowhere? What does the law allow you to do? Who are the buyers? So preparing those projects and getting them to a state where the investor doesn't have to do that groundwork is absolutely important, and it's needed for us to attract that quality investments that's needed to get this going.
But I say, what practical insights would you say emerged about structuring a power purchase, not power purchase, but public-private partnership contracts to balance risks, for instance, payments, commercial terms, a very important component there. To do all of these things in a fair or fairly between the public and the private sector.
Yeah. So good question. I think With PPPs, what makes them so unique is the fact that, unlike traditional procurement, where you design everything, from the type of tiles to the type of doors, with PPPs you have what we call output specifications. So you leave the ability to design the final elements to the private sector. That then allows them to bring in innovation. So they can bring in their own levels of innovation to the projects, which often brings down your cost of capital. So you don't have this gold plating that we typically see, where a project should only cost 100,000 and it suddenly costs 200,000, because in this case, it's being funded by private sector. So that best practice, being able to apply it into our local projects, will be beneficial for Namibians, because the citizen ultimately gets that value for money, in the sense that that taxpayer dollar actually goes a little bit further than it typically would if you wouldn't do it in this sort of procurement method.
Right. Now, how did exploring different tendering and evaluation methods during the masterclass, Panashe, equip participants to promote transparency and value for money in projects that are being awarded? Because again, we understand where the country is and where the focus is. We're really trying to be transparent, trying to be fair,
Yeah.
and then really trying to get the ball rolling, as it were.
Yeah. So the once again, PPPs are quite different from your traditional procurement, in the sense that it's a long-term contract, right? So we're not interested in just the main asset itself. So if I've got a PPP, for instance, to build a road, or to run and operate a road, it doesn't stop with me just building the road and then the road is done and then I'm gone, and after a year you can't find me. You're actually interested in the full life cycle of the asset. So you're looking at the period long after the road has been built, into 15, often even up to 20 years, where there's a requirement for the operator to constantly make sure that the potholes are properly addressed,
right,
that the accidents are sort of looked after. So within that space, we typically have what we call KPIs. So those KPIs help drive the accountability within the actual projects themselves, and it tries to make sure, obviously, that, and it's communicated right from the onset. So it's a fairly transparent process, which has gone through the Attorney General from a clearance point of view, and by the time when it goes out, everybody knows that this is what's required from this particular operator, and if he doesn't perform, you don't pay him. So,
right,
so you don't have that risk where you're paying up front and then you have these issues later on.
Can you share any key lessons from the case study and group discussions on project preparation challenges, as well as driving successful feasibility studies?
Yeah, with feasibility studies, I think one of the big outcomes that came out of there was, you can't substitute that time that's needed to prepare.
Right.
I think a lot of the questions we got was around how do we fast track this PPP process, given that it typically takes quite a bit of time. The reality is that a tree takes a certain amount of years to grow. There's really no real way to fast track it. So there's steps that are built into the process that are mandatory to try and ensure that the projects are robust. So when you start skipping some of those stages, you then start overlooking some of the real core principles that you really want to take out of this procurement method. So I think the biggest takeaway is, let's not try and muddy the waters too early. Let's do the process correctly, and there's no better time than now to actually plant that tree.
We are running out of time, but before I let you go, tell me, Panashe, how did the masterclass emphasize the role of initial project identification and planning,
Yep.
And all of this in guiding effective structural implementation, as well as achieving sustainable infrastructure development?
Got you. Look, I think the masterclass was quite broad, and I think we touched on the entire value chain. To answer the question, that very first stage in preparing a project is absolutely key. And we're seeing that's the current biggest stumbling block that exists with our public entities. So how do you take that very first idea that says, I'm in this particular part of the country, we need this service need, because that's what it is. How do we take that to the point where we actually start the project and then
100%.
do the feasibilities, etc.
Right.
To do that, there's a process that's from a best practice that's required to identify the project, and we typically do a screening. So in screening, you typically bring 20 or 30 project ideas. We run a series of questions to each of those projects. Sometimes it's 20. In a detailed screening, it can go up to 120 questions. But that process allows you to understand the drivers of the project. So you typically then test value for money, political alliance, you test market demand, risk assessment. So all those elements are easily tested without spending too much money. And you can get that information fairly quickly. Within a month, you would know whether or not this project is PPP-able, and if it's not, then you start looking at alternative mechanisms to fund it. So I think that early stage process is probably where we need to spend enough time, and we covered quite a bit of that around how do you actually do that, and how do you deploy the different tools that exist within the Ministry of Finance to actually get it going.
Before I let you go, I do understand that you'll be moderating one of the panel discussions at the summit. Part of the things that you'll be, part of the elements or components that you'll be looking at will be procurement strategy and management planning, preparations for due diligence being another, design, technical specification and output requirements, contract structure. But without it, the list is really quite extensive there. And also looking at a very interesting component which we touched on, the social triple Ps, hospitals and schools.
Yeah.
Just briefly, what is your session, and what would your session really be trying to talk about and to unpack?
Yeah. So I mean, with PPPs, the easy go-to PPPs are what we call user pays.
Yes.
And those typically it's a road where an operator drives and then I pay for the toll gate.
Right.
But you get what we call social PPPs, which typically don't have a commercial return,
right.
Typical commercial return that we see in water projects or housing projects. And those types of projects are typically run on what we call an availability payment. And this is where government actually takes on the project and says, look, we need 500 schools in Namibia, today. We can't wait until 2035 until we have enough money to build them. So let's get an operator in. Let's get somebody who can build these schools today. We agree to pay him on a quarterly basis. Every 4 months, we pay him a certain amount of money. He hires the teachers, he builds them, he maintains them, he makes sure there's water, there's electricity, and he makes sure the kids have a certain pass rate. If they don't get that pass rate, we don't pay him his quarterly amount, or we penalize him. So in doing that now, you're driving service delivery, which is what government actually wants and needs, but you're also not taking out that capital outlay. It's off balance sheet, but it's in your contingent liability, but you then outsource that function. You have somebody who can run it, but then as a government, you're driving the service, right? Because if the pass mark is low, you penalize him, because that's part of his KPIs, right? That's why you're paying him. You're paying him to make sure that the maintenance is done. If it's not done, you penalize him. So those mechanisms that are used in social PPPs are what we're going to be diving into. To say, how do we do this for hospitals? How do we do this for schools? How do we do this for prisons?
Right.
And that's going to be part of the discussion.
Panashe, I could literally have you here all night and unpack this a lot more, but that's unfortunately all the time that we have. We will definitely be taking a look at your panel discussion tomorrow at the 15th Africa Public-Private Partnership Summit currently underway in Windhoek. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.